copyright generally belongs to the author. So whoever was the person who gave that expression form is the person who owns it. And interestingly, and maybe the other participants in the panel may disagree with me on this point, but interestingly, I'm of the opinion that the person who reduces it to tangible form doesn't necessarily need to be the author. So what that means is that although someone may record a performer doing something into a video, the performance still belongs, the author of the performance in that case, if we call it that, would still be the author and the owner of the copyright. So you would have two separate things. You would have the performance, and then you would have the video recording of the performance, and the owner of the copyright of these two things would be different, despite the fact that the performer had nothing to do with the creation of the video. Okay, but copyright generally belongs to the author. There are two exceptions to that under the Copyright Act. One is if you are employed by a person, then any copyright work you create within the scope of that employment belongs to your employer. So these slides, for example, I've created because I work for IPOS International. The copyright in these slides then belongs to IPOS International and not to me personally. The other situation where you may have ownership belonging to someone other than the author is if you have an agreement with that person. So if you have a wedding photographer and you sign an agreement with the wedding photographer that you will become the owner of the photographs, then that is the arrangement and you will become the copyright holder of the IP in those photographs. And this sort of arrangement leads to a situation where you need to think about what's called background and foreground IP. So maybe you work together with someone, or maybe you take someone's intellectual property with their permission and you do something to it that changes it. So you've taken their IP, you've used your own IP, you put it together in some form, and you've created a new copyright. And then you need to see who's the owner of that and what are the issues surrounding that. So I'll just give you a brief example. Say that I have a joke, like say that I've got a really bad joke that I want to tell, and I want to tell that joke by taking a stock image and putting the joke on that stock image. So maybe what I create is a meme, right? Now, in this case, the stock image belongs to someone else, and the joke belongs to me, but I've created foreground IP by combining the two things. So if I was doing this, I would need to make sure that I had sufficient rights or some reason behind it for doing these things, right? So we'll talk about that in a second. In terms of managing partnerships, so what this means is that in terms of your copyright and other people's copyright, there are various ways in which you can arrange the ownership and licensing position behind it. So the simplest thing to do is if you buy something from a third party, say you have a wedding photographer, you simply have the wedding photographer assign the copyright in that thing to you. So that's just a straight up sale of the copyright. You buy the copyright from them. They no longer are able to make copies of the thing. You can make copies. That's the end of the story. Another common situation is where you buy or assign the copyright to yourself, but you give the other person a license back. So maybe from the wedding photographer example, you buy the copyright from the wedding photographer, but you give them a license to use that picture in their portfolio. So if they want to advertise or do something like that, you give them that right back. The next, and a very common scenario on the internet, is where you license something. So if you visit a website and you're looking at the pictures on screen, chances are the website will give you a license to do certain things with the stuff that you see on screen. They remain the copyright owner, but they give you permission to, modify the image and repost it or share it with other people on the same platform, something like that. And then the final position is if you co-own. So say you and your friend both work together to create a new dance or something like that. And then you record the dance on a video. You may co-own the rights in the choreography for that. You may both have rights in the same thing, which means that if you want to do anything with that copyright, you need to agree about whether you want to do that thing. Okay, what can't you do with a copyright work? Well, actually, that is a bit of a complicated question, and it depends on what type of work you're looking at. So, for example, literary works like books and brochures and text receive different rights than artistic works or sound recordings to do different things. But in general, the things that you cannot do with a copyright work are copy it. That's the obvious one. So for example, that would include photocopying it. It would include copying and pasting it into, say you copy them from a website and you paste it into WhatsApp, that would be treated as a copy of the thing. Or downloading a film. Okay, so that would also be treated as a copy, because when you download the film, the ones and zeros go from the internet and they get saved onto your computer, and that constitutes a copy of the work. Next, generally, you cannot publish the work, which basically just means supply to the public if the work is unpublished. So if I write a book and I have not yet put that book on sale, then if you attempt to put that book on sale, that would be infringing of my rights. Okay, so that's publication. Performance in public also. If I take a novel, so say for example, I take Harry Potter and I start reading it over a microphone at Dolby Got MRT, I would need a license to do that. I would need a license from J.K. Rowling or from her publishers to read aloud that book in public, because the copyright belongs to her. This could also apply to doing things with a device, by the way. So for example, if I have a big screen and I put a YouTube video on that screen, then that would be treated, perhaps if I was in a public place, as being a performance of that video in public. So I would need to potentially get permission from the creator of the video or from the owner of the artistic works that are shown in that video to go and do the thing. Next is communicate. So communicate basically means to transmit electronically in this context. So transmitting electronically could be sending via WhatsApp, or it could be by putting something on the internet for download or viewing, or anything of that nature. So I could radio someone something. Any of that would be communication. And then the final one is adapt. And adapt has a very specific meaning under the Copyright Act. It means depending on the type of work, it could be, for example, to translate the work into a different language. So translate something from English into Korean, or it could be to make a comic book out of a novel, or vice versa. These are all quite specific. So if you are looking to find exactly what you can and cannot do with a copyright work, you might need some support. You might need to go onto IPOS's website, for example, and read one of the guides on copyright and find exactly what you can't do with that thing. But in general, these are the types of activities that could get you in trouble, or could get someone else in trouble if they do it with your work. And these are the ones you should be aware of. So the main ones that are relevant to the internet are copy, because it includes downloading stuff, and communicate, because it involves transmitting stuff. So when you make something available on the internet, so if I choose to upload something to a website, then I am communicating that work to the public, possibly. When someone else downloads that thing from the internet, they are making a copy. So you can, as a copyright owner, both prevent someone from uploading to the website and prevent other people from downloading. And Meryl will talk a bit more about how you actually prevent that sort of stuff from happening if you don't want it to happen. And why that's relevant to you guys is because if you are, for example, posting a listing of a product on a website, when you upload the photograph to the website, you are communicating that photograph to the public. You're transmitting it or making it available on the internet, because you basically put it there for other people to see. So if that photograph doesn't belong to you, you would be infringing the photograph owner's rights in doing that. Okay, so we'll talk again a bit more about that in a second. Just to give you an example, I think, so most people think copying is just copying and pasting, so or photocopying or making a direct copy, but it's not always the case. So here's an example I found from a few years back. This lady called Laurie Mahon is getting in touch with this guy called Adam to say that she has created a short film, and the film is called Keratin, and it says it takes some influence from Adam's work. Now, I put this laughy face emoji over some because when you actually look at the content of her film, it is almost frame by frame the same as the comic books that he had made. So you can see that she hasn't just taken the ideas behind his comic books, she's actually taken the actual expression of his work and basically turned it into a film. So that would be, I think, in my view, treated as a copy of the work and potentially liable for copyright infringement. Now, whether he actually chose to sue the person or take action is up to him, but legally, this would be an issue. Okay, we also have something called fair use in copyright, which allows you to copy stuff if the use of the copyright work is fair. I won't go into much detail on this because I'm kind of running out of time, but there are essentially 4 factors. One is the purpose of the copying. So why are you doing this thing? Is it because you are trying to make a profit from someone else's expression? Or is it because you're trying to change the thing into something new or offer something innovative or transformative, including educational purposes? So that one is important. 2, the nature of the work. Obviously, if the work is a textbook, then if you copy part of the textbook, that's kind of par for the course for that type of work. But if the work is, for example, a novel, say Harry Potter, then copying a section of that would be less justifiable, less fair. Next, the amount copied. So if you copy small amounts, then it's more likely to be treated as a fair use. If you copy large amounts, then it's less likely to be treated as fair. And then finally, the effect on the market for the work. So the effect on the owner's ability to commercially exploit or control the market for their work. So this is fair use. I'll just give you some examples of fair use just very briefly. So say, for example, you have an internet meme and you repurpose that internet meme to send a new message, right? So you change it up, you post it on the internet. Some people would argue that that would be fair use of the internet meme. Perhaps not, perhaps yes. Again, it's a value judgment. Google Books is another example. So Google was sued a couple of years ago in relation to Google Books, which basically scans and presents various textbooks and other content in machine readable format. So it means, what that means is that you can search Google Books and you can find relevant textbooks and you can find excerpts from those textbooks. But the way that Google set up that platform allowed them to argue that their use was fair use, and the US courts agreed and said that it was fair use in that case. In any event, for intellectual property, especially copyright, you probably want to have some sort of clearance flowchart in your head, or maybe on a checklist or something like that. So before you use a piece of work, you want to run through in your head all these questions. So does copyright still exist? You know, is it super old? If it's a Shakespeare work, then no copyright exists. And then I can use the thing. Do the terms and conditions on the website allow me to do the thing I want to do? Are there any defenses like fair use? Can I get permission from the owner? All these things you would want to ask, both for your IP and for other people's IP. How do you ask for permission? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You can get verbal permission. In most cases, can I copy your work? If someone says yes, then you go ahead. You can write to the person, and you can get a lawyer to help you with this if you really want. But basically, what they'll do is say who you are, what you want to use, why you want to use it, whether you're prepared to pay, and then you ask them to sign and return the acknowledgement form. That's usually the form that these things take. Okay. I'm just very conscious of the time here. So just a note about some online platforms. Now, most online platforms take the same approach, which is that if you upload something to their platform, you retain ownership of the copyright in it, but they take a very broad license to do whatever they want basically with your work. So say for Facebook, you upload a photo of your family to Facebook. Yes, you retain the ownership in the copyright of that photo, but Facebook can basically do whatever they want with that photograph from that point for the purposes of offering the Facebook platform. So they can save it to their data centers, they can communicate it to other users of Facebook, they can adapt it, they can try and extract information from it, whatever they want, basically. And interestingly, most platforms have some sort of clause that basically means that even if you delete your account, especially on social media, if you delete your account, delete the photograph, if other people have shared that photograph to their friends, then the license still exists until everyone has deleted, which of course on the internet is never going to happen. So uploading stuff to social media in terms of copyright has quite a consequence, and you would want to think if the work was something that you were commercially trying to make money from, you might want to think twice about uploading it to some platforms on social media, because it might give people the right to access it without you being able to control that access. Similarly, a lot of platforms have restrictions on what you can and cannot do with their platform. So say, for example, on YouTube, your use would be limited to personal non-commercial use. And that means that, for example, you cannot publicly screen videos from YouTube. So you can't set up a TV outside and show them a YouTube video. You would need to find a different way to get permission to do that. As I mentioned, most social media platforms take broad rights to allow them to operate their platform. So for example, Instagram basically means, Instagram's license basically means that they can do basically anything with your content, provided it's through the Instagram service. And then I think finally for copyright, I just wanted to mention that some services have different terms depending on who you are or where you are in the world. So I would just be, again, if it's absolutely critical, I would be slightly careful about this. For example, Weixin has different terms depending on if you are a PRC citizen or if you are non-PRC. So slightly different terms apply.